I think I didn't do anything wrong, just let myself have a little fun when things at home felt stale. But when I saw the legal papers on the kitchen table and realized what my husband had found, I finally felt the panic set in, especially after he told me he'd watched our wedding video and noticed what I'd tried to forget. The morning sun filtered through our kitchen blinds as I watched Harry fumble with the coffee maker again. Honestly, how hard could it be? I'd shown him a dozen times how to work the new machine, but there he was, pressing buttons like a confused child. Need help with that? I asked, not bothering to hide the irritation in my voice. Harry looked up, his brown eyes tired behind his glasses. No, I've got it, Dory. Just takes me a minute to remember which button does what. Yes, I know. I sighed dramatically, moving past him to fix his mess. Maybe if you paid attention the first time I explained it. Our daughter Megan looked up from her cereal bowl, her 9-year-old face scrunched with concern. Why are you always mad at Daddy? The question caught me off guard, but I quickly recovered. I'm not mad, sweetheart. Mommy just gets frustrated when people don't listen. Harry's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't respond. He never did anymore. That was part of the problem, his complete lack of backbone. When had he become so weak? Later that afternoon, Harry's mother Jerry stopped by with his brother Ben and sister-in-law Tara. We were sitting around the living room, making small talk, when I saw my opportunity. You should have seen Harry this morning, I said with a laugh that sounded more cutting than playful. Couldn't figure out how to work the coffee maker we've had for 6 months. I swear, sometimes I feel like I'm raising 2 children instead of 1. The room fell uncomfortably quiet. Jerry shifted in her chair, her lips pressed into a thin line. Ben glanced at his brother with something that looked like pity. Come on, Dory, Tara said gently. We all have our moments with new gadgets. Oh, this isn't about gadgets, I continued, warming to my theme. Harry just doesn't have much initiative. Never has. Remember when we were planning the wedding? I had to make every single decision because he couldn't be bothered to have an opinion about anything. Harry's face flushed red. I thought we were supposed to be partners in those decisions. I was waiting for you to ask what I wanted. See? I gestured toward him, like he'd just proved my point. No initiative. A real man would have stepped up and taken charge of at least something. The silence that followed was deafening. Megan had stopped playing with her toys and was staring at us with wide, worried eyes. Maybe we should change the subject, Ben said quietly, but there was an edge to his voice I hadn't heard before. Why? Because Harry can't handle a little teasing? I laughed again. Honestly, he's so sensitive about everything. I can't even joke around without him taking it personally. That wasn't joking, Ben said, his voice flat. That was cruel. The accusation hung in the air like a slap. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but I wasn't about to back down. I think I know the difference between joking and cruelty, Ben. Harry and I have been married for 10 years. If he had a problem with how I talked to him, I'm sure he'd say something. All eyes turned to Harry, who sat frozen in his chair like a deer in headlights. The old Harry would have laughed it off, made some self-deprecating joke to diffuse the tension. But this Harry just stared at his hands. Right, honey? I pressed. You know I'm just kidding around. Harry finally looked up at me, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach clench. It wasn't hurt or embarrassment. It was something colder, something that looked almost like calculation. Sure, Dory, he said quietly. Just kidding around. But the way he said it made me wonder if I'd pushed too far this time. After his family left, I found Harry in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. What's wrong with you? I asked. You barely said 2 words after Ben made that ridiculous comment about me being cruel. Harry looked up at me with those tired eyes again. Do you really think I have no initiative? The question surprised me. Harry, you know I was just... Do you? He interrupted, which was unusual for him. Harry never interrupted anyone. I sat down beside him, suddenly feeling like I was walking through a minefield. I think you could be more assertive sometimes. Take charge more. But that doesn't mean... I see. Harry stood up and walked to his dresser, pulling out a clean shirt. I'm going for a drive. Where? Just out. I need to think. He left without another word, and I sat there feeling strangely unsettled. Harry never just went for drives. He was a homebody, preferred staying in with his computer or watching TV with Megan. I told myself I was overreacting. So what if Ben thought I was being too hard on Harry? Ben didn't understand our relationship. Harry and I had always teased each other. It was just our dynamic. If Harry had a problem with it, he would have said something years ago. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to Harry breathe beside me in the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The way he'd looked at me earlier, that cold calculation in his eyes, it was like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. And maybe, just maybe, he didn't like what he saw. 3 weeks later, I was working late at the office again. As the office manager for a small marketing firm, I often stayed after hours to catch up on paperwork. But lately, I had a different reason for lingering. Joel Forster had started dropping by around 7, after most of the staff had gone home. He was a sales rep for one of our vendors, and technically, he had legitimate reasons to be there. But we both knew his visits weren't really about business anymore. "You look stressed," Joel said, settling into the chair across from my desk. He was handsome in a way Harry had never been, confident, well-dressed, with the kind of easy charm that made people want to be around him. "Rough day?" I leaned back in my chair and sighed. "Harry's been acting strange lately. Ever since that thing with his family, he's been different." "Different how?" "Quiet, distant. He used to be so predictable, you know. Now it's like he's thinking about things all the time, and I have no idea what's going on in his head." Joel nodded sympathetically. "Maybe he's finally growing a backbone." The comment stung because it was exactly what I'd been thinking. That's not fair. Harry's always been gentle. It's one of the things I liked about him when we first met, but not anymore. I hesitated. This was dangerous territory, but Joel had a way of making me feel safe to say things I wouldn't dare voice to anyone else. "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a ghost. He goes through the motions, work, dinner, helping Megan with homework, but there's no passion, no fire. He never fights for anything he wants." "Including you?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" Joel leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I mean, if another man was interested in his wife, would Harry even notice? Would he care enough to fight for you?" My heart was beating faster now. We were crossing a line we'd been dancing around for weeks, and part of me knew I should stop this conversation right now. But another part, the part that felt neglected and unappreciated at home, wanted to keep going. "I don't think he would notice," I admitted quietly. "He's so wrapped up in his own world, his computers and his work problems. Sometimes I wonder if he'd even miss me if I disappeared." Joel reached across the desk and covered my hand with his. His loss would be another man's gain. I should have pulled my hand away. I should have reminded Joel that I was married, that he was Harry's friend, that this was wrong on every level. Instead, I let his thumb trace circles on my skin and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of being truly wanted. My phone buzzed with a text from Harry. "When will you be home? Megan's asking for you." The spell was broken. I pulled my hand back and grabbed my phone, typing quickly. "Working late for the team. Tell Megan I'll read to her tomorrow night." "The smothering husband checking in?" Joel asked with a wry smile. "He's not smothering. He just—" I trailed off, realizing I was about to defend Harry to the man who was clearly trying to seduce me. "He worries too much." Joel stood up and moved around the desk, stopping just close enough that I could smell his cologne. "You deserve someone who appreciates what he has, Dory. Someone who sees how amazing you are." Before I could respond, he leaned down and kissed my forehead, a gesture that was intimate without being overtly sexual. But the message was clear. "I should go," he said. "But think about what I said." After he left, I sat alone in my office, my heart racing and my mind spinning. What was I doing? I was a married woman with a daughter, and Joel was Harry's friend. This was insane. But as I drove home through the dark suburban streets, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Joel looked at me, like I was beautiful, desirable, worth fighting for. When was the last time Harry had looked at me that way? I found Harry in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. He looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, I was terrified he could see the guilt written all over my face. "How was work?" he asked. "Fine. Busy. You know how it is at month end." Numbed. He nodded and went back to the dishes. "Megan was disappointed you couldn't read to her. She's been looking forward to it all day." The criticism was gentle, but it hit me like an accusation. I said I'd read to her tomorrow. One night isn't going to traumatize her. I didn't say it would. I just said she was disappointed. There was something in his tone that made me defensive. "I work hard to support this family, Harry. Sometimes that means making sacrifices." He looked at me then with that same calculating expression I'd seen before. "I know you do. We all make sacrifices." The way he said it made me wonder what sacrifices he thought he was making. What did Harry have to sacrifice? He had a comfortable job, a nice home, a family who adored him. What more could he possibly want? Later, as I lay in bed pretending to sleep, my phone buzzed with a text from Joel. Thanks for listening tonight. I meant what I said about you deserving better. Remember the wedding? You looked so beautiful that day. But even then, I could see you weren't completely happy. Some things never change. Humjumnumsy for a long time before deleting it. Joel was talking about our wedding day, mine and Harry's. What did he mean he could see I wasn't happy, and why was he thinking about that now? I tried to push the questions out of my mind, but they kept circling back. Had Joel been watching me that closely at my own wedding? Had he been interested in me even then? The thought should have disturbed me, but instead, it sent a thrill through my body that I couldn't ignore. 2 weeks later, we were at Roselli's, the Italian restaurant where our group of friends met monthly for dinner and drinks. Harry sat beside me, quietly nursing his beer while the conversation flowed around him. Joel was across the table, charming everyone with stories from his latest sales calls. I'd had 2 glasses of wine, just enough to loosen my tongue and lower my inhibitions. When the conversation turned to home improvement projects, I saw my opening. Don't ask Harry about home improvement, I said with a laugh. Last month, I asked him to hang a picture frame, and he spent 3 hours reading online tutorials before he'd even pick up a hammer. A few people chuckled politely, but I could see Harry's jaw tighten. At least he wanted to do it right, Tara said diplomatically. Oh, please, I waved her off. It's a picture frame, not rocket science. But that's Harry. He overthinks everything. Remember when we were buying our car? He researched for 6 months before making a decision. 6 months! I finally had to just pick one myself, because I was tired of taking the bus. This time, the laughter was more uncomfortable. Ben was staring at his drink, and even Joel looked slightly uncomfortable with the direction I was taking. But I couldn't seem to stop myself. The wine, the frustration I'd been feeling at home, and the intoxicating attention from Joel had created a perfect storm of poor judgment. The worst part is, he never stands up for himself, I continued, my voice getting louder. Like this one time, the waiter at that new place downtown was incredibly rude to us. I mean, really awful. And Harry just sat there and took it. I had to be the one to ask for the manager. Maybe he was trying to avoid making a scene, someone suggested quietly. Or maybe he just doesn't have the backbone to stand up when someone disrespects his wife, I shot back. I mean, what kind of man lets people walk all over him like that? The table had gone completely silent now. I looked around at the faces staring back at me, some shocked, some disgusted, all uncomfortable. But it was too late to stop. Don't get me wrong. I love Harry, I said, trying to soften the blow. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd married someone with a little more fire, you know? And that's when Harry stood up. Excuse me, he said quietly, dropping his napkin on the table. I need some air. He walked away without another word, leaving me sitting there with 8 pairs of eyes staring at me in judgment. Jesus, Dory, Ben said, his voice tight with anger. What the hell is wrong with you? What? You were just humiliating your husband in front of his friends, Tara interrupted, her usual diplomatic tone replaced with something much sharper. That wasn't teasing. That was cruel. He's being too sensitive, I protested. But even as I said it, I could hear how hollow it sounded. Harry knows I don't mean anything by it. Does he? Joel asked quietly. It was the first thing he'd said since my tirade began, and something in his tone made me look at him more closely. Because from where I'm sitting, it looked like you meant every word. The accusation from Joel, of all people, hit me like a slap. He was supposed to be on my side, supposed to understand that Harry didn't appreciate what he had. I think maybe you should go after him, Tara suggested, but it sounded more like an order than a suggestion. I found Harry outside, leaning against his car in the parking lot. His face was pale, and he was staring up at the stars like he was trying to find answers in the darkness. Harry, come on, I said, trying to sound casual. You know I was just having fun in there. Everyone was laughing. He looked at me then, and the expression on his face made my stomach drop. It wasn't hurt or embarrassment. It was something much worse. It was disappointment. No, Dory, he said quietly. They weren't laughing with you. They were laughing at me. There's a difference. You're being too sensitive. Am I? He pushed off from the car and faced me fully. Tell me something. If I talked about you the way you just talked about me, how would you feel? I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. Because the truth was, if Harry had spent 10 minutes telling our friends about my flaws and weaknesses, I would have been devastated. That's what I thought, Harry said when I didn't answer. I'm going home. You can ride with Ben and Tara. Harry, wait! but he was already getting in his car. I watched his taillights disappear into the night and felt something cold settle in my chest. When I went back inside, the mood at the table had shifted completely. People were checking their phones, making excuses to leave early. The fun, relaxed atmosphere was gone, replaced by an awkward tension that seemed to follow me like a shadow. "I think maybe you owe Harry an apology," Ben said as he and Tara drove me home. "For what? Having a sense of humor?" "That wasn't humor, Dory," Tara said from the passenger seat. "That was you tearing down your husband to make yourself feel better. And frankly, it was painful to watch. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain that they didn't understand the dynamics of my marriage. But deep down, I knew they were right. I had crossed a line tonight, and everyone at that table had seen it. When I got home, Harry was already in bed with his back to me. I slipped in beside him and tried to think of what to say, how to explain what had happened. "Harry," I whispered, "I'm tired, Dory. Can we talk tomorrow?" But we didn't talk tomorrow, or the next day. Harry went to work, came home, helped Megan with her homework, and went to bed. He was polite, functional, but distant. It was like living with a stranger who happened to share my last name. And the worst part was, I was starting to realize that maybe I preferred the stranger. The change in Harry was subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. He started locking his phone, something he'd never done in 10 years of marriage. He began staying late at work, claiming he had projects to finish. When I asked about his day, his answers became shorter, more guarded. At first, I told myself this was temporary, that he was still sulking about what happened at the restaurant and would eventually get over it. But as the weeks passed, I began to realize this wasn't sulking. This was something else entirely. "Where were you tonight?" I asked one Thursday evening when he walked in at nearly 9 o'clock. "Work," he said, hanging his jacket in the closet. "I told you I'd be late." "Until 9. What kind of project keeps you at the office until 9? Harry looked at me with those calculating eyes again. "The kind that pays for this house and everything in it." The response was so unlike him that I actually took a step back. The old Harry would have apologized for being late, would have explained exactly what he'd been working on, would have asked if I needed help with anything. This Harry just walked past me to check on Megan. I followed him to our daughter's room, where I found him sitting on her bed, listening to her read from her favorite book. "Daddy, why don't you and Mommy laugh together anymore?" Megan asked, looking up from the pages. Harry's expression softened when he looked at her. "Sometimes grown-ups go through difficult times, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean we love you any less." Are you going to get divorced like Emma's parents?" The question hung in the air like a bomb. I felt my heart stop, waiting for Harry's response. "I don't know, Megan," he said quietly. "I hope not. But whatever happens, you'll always be the most important thing in both our lives." I wanted to interrupt, to reassure Megan that everything was fine, that Daddy was just being dramatic. But something in Harry's tone warned me to stay silent. After Megan was asleep, I confronted him in our bedroom. "How could you tell her we might get divorced? She's 9 years old, Harry. You're going to give her nightmares." "I told her the truth," he said, pulling a pillow and blanket from the closet. "Something you might want to try sometime." "What's that supposed to mean?" Instead of answering, Harry made a bed on the floor beside our dresser. "What are you doing?" "I'm sleeping down here tonight, and probably for a while." "Why?" Harry looked up at me from his makeshift bed, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the old hurt in his eyes. "Because I can't lie next to someone who thinks so little of me," he said simply. "And because I need space to figure out what I'm going to do next." "What you're going to do about what?" But Harry had already turned off the light and rolled over, ending the conversation. I lay awake most of that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to Harry breathe on the floor beside me. What was happening to my marriage? When had everything gotten so complicated? The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day trying to make sense of the situation. Maybe I had been too hard on Harry lately. Maybe I needed to make more of an effort to appreciate the things he did for our family. But even as I made these resolutions, I found myself thinking about Joel, about the way he looked at me, the way he made me feel beautiful and desired. Harry used to make me feel that way, but somewhere along the line, we'd lost that spark. Was it my fault? Had I killed something between us with my criticism and complaints? That evening I made Harry's favorite dinner and opened a bottle of wine. When he walked in from work, I was waiting with a smile and an apology ready. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began. "About me being too critical. Maybe you're right. Maybe I have been taking you for granted." Harry looked at the dinner spread, then at me, with an expression I couldn't read. "Thank you," he said quietly. "This is nice." We ate in relative silence, with Megan chattering about her day at school, filling the gaps in conversation. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that maybe we could get back to normal. But after Megan went to bed, Harry retreated to his home office and closed the door. I could hear him typing on his computer, but when I knocked and asked what he was working on, he just said research. Later that night, I woke up to find Harry's side of the bed empty. I got up to look for him and found him in the living room, sitting in front of his laptop with headphones on. On the screen was our wedding video. My blood turned to ice as I watched him pause and rewind a section, watching it over and over again. I couldn't see exactly what part he was focusing on, but I had a terrible suspicion. "Harry?" I said softly. He jumped and quickly closed the laptop, pulling off his headphones. "You scared me," he said. "What are you doing?" "Just remembering." "Remembering what?" Harry looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his eyes that made my knees weak. It wasn't anger or hurt, it was knowledge. "Things I should have paid attention to at the time," he said quietly. He stood up and walked past me toward the bedroom, leaving me standing alone in the dark living room, with my heart pounding in my chest. I knew what he'd seen, and I knew that everything was about to change. I woke up the next morning to find Harry already gone, and a manila envelope sitting on the kitchen table next to my coffee cup. My name was written on it in Harry's careful handwriting. Inside were printed copies of text messages. My text messages with Joel. Messages I thought I had deleted. Messages that made it very clear what had been happening between us. My hands were shaking as I read through them, seeing our relationship laid out in black and white. The flirting, the late-night conversations, the planning of secret meetings. And there, at the bottom of the stack, was a screenshot of the message Joel had sent about our wedding day. But it wasn't just the messages. Harry had included bank statements showing charges to restaurants where I'd met Joel, phone records showing calls I'd made to him, even security footage timestamps from my office building showing Joel arriving after hours. The man I'd married, the man I'd dismissed as weak and passive, had built a case against me like a prosecutor preparing for trial. My phone rang. It was Harry. "Did you find the envelope?" he asked without preamble. "Harry, I can explain." "No," he said quietly. "You can't. There's no explanation for this, Dory. No excuse that makes it okay. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. And it's worse than I thought, because it's been going on for months, maybe longer." I sank into a kitchen chair, my legs too weak to hold me up. "Where are you?" "At my lawyer's office. I'll be home this evening to pack some things. I'm staying at Ben's for a while." "Harry, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling." "The time for counseling was before you decided to have an affair with my best friend." The line went dead. I spent the rest of the day in a panic, calling Harry's phone over and over, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. I called Joel, but his phone went straight to voicemail too. I even called Ben, but he hung up as soon as he heard my voice. When Megan came home from school, I tried to act normal, but she immediately sensed something was wrong. "Where's Daddy?" she asked. "He's working late again." But when Harry came home at 7 o'clock with an empty suitcase, there was no hiding the truth anymore. "Daddy, are you going somewhere?" Megan asked, watching him pack clothes from our bedroom. "I'm going to stay with Uncle Ben for a little while," Harry said gently. "But I'll still see you all the time. Nothing about that is going to change." "Is it because of what I asked? About the divorce?" Harry knelt down and pulled Megan into a hug. "No, sweetheart. This has nothing to do with you. Sometimes adults make mistakes, and those mistakes have consequences. But you didn't do anything wrong." I watched this exchange from the doorway, tears streaming down my face. "Harry, please don't do this. We can fix this. I'll stop seeing Joel. I'll do whatever you want. You'll stop seeing Joel?" Harry looked at me with something that might have been pity. "Dory, you should have stopped seeing Joel before you started. The fact that you think this is negotiable tells me everything I need to know. I made a mistake. You made a choice, multiple choices, over multiple months. You chose to meet him secretly. You chose to lie to me about where you were. You chose to spend our money on dinners with him. You chose to humiliate me in front of our friends while carrying on behind my back." Each word hit me like a physical blow. "I never meant for this to happen." "Yes, you did." Harry zipped up his suitcase and looked at me one last time. "You meant for all of it to happen. The only thing you didn't mean was for me to find out." Oh, after he left, I called Joel again. This time, he answered, "Dory, I can't talk right now." "Harry knows," I said. "He has everything. Messages, phone records, everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry," Joel said finally. "I really am. But I think we should probably not contact each other for a while." "That's it? That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say? That I'll leave my job and run away with you? That I'll fight Harry for you?" We both knew this was temporary, Dory. We both knew it couldn't last. Ugh. The casual dismissal was like a knife to the chest. This man, who had made me feel so special and desired, was throwing me away the moment things got complicated. Ugh. "I thought you cared about me," I whispered. "I did care about you. I do, but not enough to destroy my life over it. I'm sorry." He hung up, leaving me alone in my empty house with my sleeping daughter and the wreckage of my marriage. 3 days later, a process server came to my door with legal separation papers. Harry was seeking temporary custody of Megan, temporary spousal support, and exclusive use of the family home. But it was the last page that made me sink to the floor in despair. Harry had included a detailed timeline of my affair, complete with evidence, and a statement that he intended to file for divorce on grounds of adultery. The weak, passive man I had married was gone. In his place was someone I didn't recognize, someone methodical, determined, and completely done with me. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I realized I might actually lose everything. 6 months later, I sat in a conference room at my lawyer's office, staring at a settlement agreement that would change my life forever. Across the table, Harry sat with his attorney, looking calm and composed, in a way that made my stomach churn. The evidence had been overwhelming. Harry's IT background had served him well. He'd recovered deleted messages, tracked my location data, even found security camera footage from the hotel where Joel and I had met twice. But the wedding video had been the final nail in the coffin. "Your Honor," Harry's lawyer had said during our custody hearing, "we'd like to present Exhibit A7, a portion of the defendant's own wedding video, timestamp 4:47 p.m. I'd watched in horror as the judge viewed the footage of Joel's hand clearly visible under my dress during the reception, while I laughed and leaned into him just feet away from my new husband. It was damning evidence that our affair had roots going back to my wedding day, something I'd tried desperately to deny. "Mrs. Mallow," the judge had said, looking at me over her glasses, "this appears to show inappropriate contact between you and Mr. Forster at your own wedding reception. Can you explain this?" I'd tried to claim it was innocent, that Joel had simply been helping me adjust my dress. But combined with all the other evidence, the messages, the hotel receipts, the testimony from Harry's family, it painted a picture of a woman who had been deceiving her husband from the very beginning. The custody evaluation had been equally devastating. Megan, when interviewed by the court-appointed counselor, had expressed a clear preference for living with her father. "Daddy listens to me," she'd told the counselor, according to the report. "Mommy is always angry, or sad, or on the phone. Daddy makes me feel safe." Those words had cut deeper than any legal document ever could. Now, sitting in this sterile conference room, I was faced with the final terms of my defeat. Joint custody with Harry having primary placement. I would get Megan every other weekend and one evening per week. The house would be sold, with Harry keeping 60% of the proceeds. I would pay child support based on my income, and there would be no alimony. "This is very generous, considering the circumstances," my lawyer whispered to me. "I strongly recommend you accept it." I looked across the table at Harry, searching his face for any sign of the man I'd married 10 years ago. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who had learned to protect himself and his daughter from people who would hurt them. "I need to ask you something," I said to Harry, my voice barely above a whisper. His lawyer started to object, but Harry held up a hand. What?" he asked. "Do you hate me?" Harry was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "No," he said finally. I don't hate you, Dory, but I don't trust you, and I don't respect you, and I won't let you hurt Megan the way you hurt me." The words were delivered without malice, which somehow made them hurt even more. "I never meant to hurt anyone," I said. I know," Harry replied. "That's what makes it so much worse. You destroyed our family, and you didn't even think it was important enough to mean it." I signed the papers with shaking hands, officially ending the marriage I had taken for granted and lost through my own selfishness and pride. As we left the conference room, Harry's family was waiting in the hallway. Jerry, Ben, and Tara had all testified on Harry's behalf, describing my pattern of emotional abuse and the impact it had on both Harry and Meghan. They looked at me now with a mixture of pity and disgust. "I hope you're happy," Ben said as I walked past. But I wasn't happy. I was living in a small apartment across town, working a job that barely covered my expenses, and seeing my daughter 4 days a month. Joel had transferred to another territory and changed his phone number. The friends we'd had as a couple had all sided with Harry, leaving me completely isolated. The final humiliation came 3 months later, when I saw Harry at Meghan's school play. He was sitting in the front row with a woman I didn't recognize, someone pretty and kind-looking, who held his hand during the performance and smiled at Meghan like she genuinely cared about her. After the show, I watched this woman hug my daughter, saw Meghan light up in a way she hadn't with me in years. Harry looked happier than I'd seen him since the early days of our marriage. "She's nice," Meghan told me later when I picked her up for my weekend visit. "Her name is Lisa, and she's teaching me how to braid friendship bracelets." I wanted to be angry, to tell Meghan that this woman was trying to replace me. But looking at my daughter's bright, happy face, I realized that maybe replacement wasn't the worst thing that could happen to her. Maybe she deserved someone who would put her first, who would listen to her, who wouldn't fill the house with anger and resentment and lies. Maybe they both did. As I tucked Meghan into bed that night in my small apartment, she looked up at me with serious eyes. "Mommy, do you know why Daddy left?" I thought about lying, about blaming Harry or making excuses, but my daughter deserved better than that. "Because I made some very bad choices," I said quietly, "and I hurt people I was supposed to love and protect. Do you wish you could take it back?" "Every day," I whispered, and for the first time in months, I was telling the complete truth. 6 months later, I received an invitation to Harry's wedding. He was marrying Lisa, the woman from the school play, in a small ceremony with close family and friends. Meghan was going to be the flower girl. I wasn't invited, of course. Harry had simply sent me the invitation as a courtesy, so I would know why Meghan would be away that weekend. But enclosed with the invitation was a handwritten note. "Dory, I want you to know that I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine and Meghan's. We can't move forward while carrying anger and resentment. I hope someday you can forgive yourself too, and find the happiness you were looking for. Harry." I sat in my empty apartment, holding that note and crying harder than I had since the day he left. Harry had gotten everything: the house, our daughter, the respect of our friends and family, and now a new wife who would love him the way he deserved to be loved. And I had gotten exactly what I'd earned: nothing. But maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward becoming someone worthy of forgiveness.